Oh, man. I hate landing the plane. Jordan, how do you land the plane? Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the How to Film Weddings podcast, episode number 19. I'm Johnny Bunn, your host. This is Nick Miller. All right.
That was awesome.
Awesome or awful? It cut out.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Okay, so this is episode 19.
Sure.
Are you ready? You ready?
Yeah, so ready.
Okay. Here we go. Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the How to Film Weddings podcast. My name is Nick Miller and I am joined by my good friend, Mr. John Bunn. Why don't you say hi, John?
What's up?
Okay, today we are really excited to be joined by Jordan Bunch. He runs Lady Bird Studios. He runs Film Mavericks. You guys probably know who he is and all the stuff that he does. We are super excited to interview him and talk to him, and we really hear his heart and how he runs his business and how he really wants people to succeed. He is on the verge of a 7-figure business, which he told us he'll probably break in the 2020 year. So if you want to know how to run a business, how to help people succeed in their lives, and how to make a good amount of money doing it, you're definitely going to want to check out this episode. So let's join in with that conversation.
Thank you so much, Jordan, for being on the show. Why don't you say hello, introduce yourself, and tell us how you kind of got started.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Jordan Bunch. I am executive producer of Film Mavericks, and I also... at this point, it sounds weird to call yourself a CEO of a wedding video business, but that's kind of how I'm functioning, because that's really the only role I'm playing in the company is sort of executive level decisions and sort of quality control. So other than that, I don't do a lot with the wedding business. So that's sort of how I've titled myself. Which is like a dramatic change from even like 2 years ago. Even a year ago, actually, pretty dramatic change in what my role has looked like. And so that's why I have to wear this jacket now, because like if I'm going to be a
very fresh
CEO, then I have to wear this fancy jacket.
Yes.
Actually, the story behind the jacket is funny. I wore it because I was really cold and it was the only thing I had. And then I felt like my day went awesome. And I was like, maybe it's the jacket.
Jacket guy. You're now the jacket guy.
I'm all about aesthetics, you know? I got my candle, I got my light up there. So I was like, hey, Got to class it up. Let's see if this aesthetic works for me. And so far it's working.
And you've already landed yourself on the How to Film Weddings podcast.
I already did it just in day 2 of wearing the jacket. So it totally works. Yeah. What do you want to know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that to the listeners for your podcast, our podcast, I mean, I just would love to hear kind of the backstory of how you got going, and then when you started to realize, like, you know, because I think a lot of people, it's just a one-man band, or, you know, the husband-wife team or something. But like from when you got going to kind of when you decided, hey, let me add somebody, or like just kind of what was that story of how you got going with, was it Jordan Bunch Productions? Was it another company? Yeah. What's that story?
Yeah. So like most people, it sort of started as a hobby. I liked photography. I liked sort of filmmaking. I was making like these little spoof commercials for my church. Like we did the whole Geico caveman thing, advertising for like some like retreats the church was doing and stuff. So like just really goofy stuff as a hobby. I actually made a spoof horror film with my little sister, which was awesome. But these were the kind of things that I did just as a hobby, as a fun thing. And then I actually like bought my first quote serious camera. It was not really a serious camera. It was like the entry level DSLR. It was like a Pentax. And I had some friends that just got engaged. They're like, hey, take our pictures. Like, cool, that sounds like fun. So I did that. And then I just like threw them up on like I don't remember if it was Tumblr or Blogspot or something like that, you know. And I coined it Jordan Bunch Photography. So yes. That was kind of the start, I guess. And one of those couples had a few couples after that. They wanted me to do it. And one of those couples said, hey, photograph our wedding. And I'm like, heck no, I'm not photographing your wedding. That's a terrible idea. you should definitely hire a professional to do that. And they were like, no, we loved the photos. You have to do it. And over the course of it took them like 3 months to convince me to do it. And finally I said yes, and said, I need, I think I charged them $800. And I said, whew, with that money, I'm going to buy this lens that I need. I'm going to buy a speed light. I need that. And I'm also going to spend $200 on like this class.
Yeah.
Took at the time it was called Cowboy training, which was an amazing resource at the time. Learned from like Cliff Maurer and some of these, top wedding photographers. And anyway, so I got started in wedding photography. That sort of, I got more and more work there. I was living in Abilene at the time, and we were ready to get out of Abilene. And so we moved to Austin, and I just said, hey, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off. I'm going to do this thing full time. I guess I skipped the part where I kind of added video into the mix. But I started adding video primarily as like a hybrid kind of thing, as like the whole fusion thing. And so that really helped me as I was getting started in Austin, because nobody else was doing fusion that I knew of in Austin. And so it was really different, and it was a way to like, not totally break the bank, but get both kind of thing at the time. And so, for like $5,000, you could get like a full photography package with like a little bit of video in there. And so like it was a popular option. It kind of got my name out there, got doing a lot more of that stuff. And then I started falling more and more in love with video, and got better and better at video, and sort of like, I feel like photography kind of like stalemated. Like I was, doing good stuff, but it wasn't like progressing like video was for me. And partly it's just like around the passion thing. I just love video. I love storytelling. I love being able to, like, I would be sitting there, editing my videos and like in tears, because it's like this big emotional story, and I just loved that aspect of it. And so I just kind of went full on with video. And whenever I had jobs that needed a photographer, I would hire a photographer to come and shoot it. And I would do the video. And, I just sort of like really liked that model of like, I can make some money doing photography, even though I'm doing video and I'm just hiring somebody else for it. And so that was sort of my first taste of starting to hire somebody else to generate income for me. And, from there, I started filling out my calendar. I was shooting like 35 weddings in a year, and also had very young kids, and felt like, long term, I don't feel like I can do that. I don't feel like long term I can keep up this pace of 35 weddings in a year. Also, I loathed when people would come to me and wanted to hire me, but I was already booked. Or, they would come to me and want to hire me, but their price point was where I was at like 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, I would love to take that paycheck and shoot that wedding. But 2 years later, not so much. And so I had kind of this perfect storm of like, okay, I got to figure this out, because I'm very much like a futurist. Like I'm always thinking long term, what's down the road. And I'm also like super competitive. Like when I do the Strengths Finder thing, like those are two of my top 3 as futurist and competitive. And so with that, I just was like, all right, I came up with an idea to how to fix that problem. So I started a second brand where I was going to train up some young, aspiring, coachable, likable people to film weddings. And I was going to create a second brand that was really, a lot more affordable, that the product wasn't, quite as good as what I was doing with my boutique brand, Jordan Bunch Productions, but it was good enough. And that started to roll pretty quickly. Our first year, it was sort of a trial run. I think we only took like 6 or 8 weddings in that first year, and that was very intentional. And then in the next year, I think we did like 40. Whoa. The next year we did 80, and the next year we did about 150.
Jeez.
And so it just kind of like kept snowballing really quickly.
Yeah.
Because we were offering a very quality product. It was very consistent because I wasn't hiring freelancers.
Yep.
And it was like a team that I had trained up. So I sort of equated it to like it was like you could get your Lexus, or you get your like Toyota Camry, it was like a very consistent, reliable, quality product at a more affordable price point, or if you wanted like the luxury side, you could kind of go all out and get yourself a Lexus. So it's kind of like the two different.
Yeah.
That was the two different brands at the time. I know there's a whole bunch here. I don't want to. I'm happy to answer more specific questions.
Yeah, that's great.
But I could talk forever. So guide me.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, I think that like your like future, like seeing forward, like looking forward is a big thing that I think a lot of people in our industry are missing. It's like, oh, I want to make $5,000 on a wedding. But like, that's the goal. And like, that's it, or, I want to make, $500,000 in revenue for a year, but like, there's nothing else in that. We just have these pipe dreams. And I think that's a really good thing that you notice and you recognize is like, hey, I want to get these couples that maybe can't afford me now, or I hate turning people down. And so you creatively problem solve something that I'm sure in your area at the time, there was nothing else like that, so that you could really bring in these people. What was your process? What would you say to someone that's thinking, oh, okay, I have these goals, or I have these thoughts, these things that I want to accomplish? Like, where would you start them, kind of down that path, whether it be, a volume brand or, just financial goals or whatever to build to something like that?
Yeah, a few things. One is a willingness to be patient. I think we sort of, there's been a culture because of like the popularity of like even the term entrepreneur. There's been this sort of culture, this YouTube, Instagram culture of like, I can be super rich and famous, in 6 months, by being like a vlogger or whatever. It's like this idea of like, getting rich quick is like more prevalent now more than ever, and this is definitely not like a get rich quick thing. This is like a like work your rear off for 3 to 5 years, pouring everything back into the business so that one day it can become something really huge and extremely financially rewarding. And the other thing is like a willingness to let go of control. So like when I
that's huge.
Yeah. When I call myself a CEO, it's not because it's like a power thing. It's like, it's, if you know like much about what a CEO does, like a good one, it's someone who like, sort of helps to think about the bigger picture ideas of where things are headed, and then lets the day-to-day operations go to everyone else. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very, other than, I guess one of the things I haven't let go of yet fully is sales. I've let go of a lot of that, but not all of it. So I definitely still operate in a sales capacity with Lady Bird Studios. But other than that, I'm very uninvolved in sort of the day-to-day operations of it. I have a fantastic, incredible studio manager who handles all of our. If it would be equally, I could equally call her chief operations officer, because like she handles all of like our operational stuff. So like everything to do with like client communication, to like getting the gear ready, to picking the teams that are going to be shooting which wedding, to organizing all of that, to dumping the footage for our editors, like all of that. So, so it's very much like a putting the right people in the right places, and then trusting them to do their job, and empowering to do that, and giving them whatever they need to accomplish those things well.
Yeah, that's really good. So practically speaking, you move, from Abilene, Texas to the major, city of Austin. You're new in this market. You start building this brand. You start building yourself kind of past where certain, brides are reaching out. So being a forward thinker, I mean, you definitely, it's like, okay, well, how can I fix this problem? So kind of Lady Bird Studios, or whatever it was called at that time, is born. How did you go? I know that you said like the kind of people that you were looking for, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about, like, I've heard you say it before, just about, hiring somebody that just thinks they know everything versus a teachable spirit or somebody. What did it look like when you brought on your first person? Like, when was that? And how did you start adding more and more people? How'd you start training them, like, practically speaking?
Yeah. So, the first person that we really hired was my editor. We also, I guess, he was editing and lead shooting for us. So that was our first hire. And that, I think, is sort of a natural fit when you're trying to start this. If you can hire somebody who can both like do a good job lead shooting, you can do some coaching, kind of get them just kind of right where you want them in terms of shooting, and then they can do the editing for you, and you can kind of offer feedback and help them kind of tweak and get it to where you need it. I think that's the natural fit for a first hire. From there, what we did next was we started hiring other shooters, and this was a super different approach from how probably everybody else hires shooters. We put an ad on Craigslist. The ad said something like, actually, I would love to go back and look at what that ad is. I have it saved somewhere, but it said something to the effect of, looking for wedding filmmakers, no experience needed, must be highly coachable, energetic, passionate, creative vision, and reliable transportation. Like, that's it. And gosh, within like a week, I had probably 150 applications for this job.
Oh, wow.
So that was a little bit of a crazy thing, like sorting through all that. I really like kind of was able to narrow it down quickly by like who sent a cover letter and a resume versus who said, how much does this pay? Yeah. So, so I was able to narrow it down. I think I hired, in quotes, if you're listening to this, I think I hired like 6 people to start, something like that. And all these people, with the exception of one, had like no experience behind a camera. There was one person who had experience behind a camera. He was a film school guy. And I was very against kind of hiring film school guys, except he was different in that he had a ton of experience because he had done an internship with the University of Texas athletics department. And so he was like shooting and editing all their stuff and doing it really quickly. Like with sports stuff, you have to turn it around like that day. So he was really different in that way, but still needed a good amount of coaching. But we actually, the first time that we hired them, I took them to a wedding venue, told the wedding venue, hey, we want to give you a free little promo video of your space. So we were going to film the space, but really I just walked with them through the day. Like, what does the day look like? Starting with when we get there and we try to meet the key characters. We're meeting the bride, shaking her hand, figuring out the space. How do we shoot bride prep? All the way through the end of the day, like actually physically walking them through and having them get behind the camera and shoot it. So that was kind of how we began. From there, one of those lead shooters, Taylor, sort of started asking for more stuff. She said, hey, I noticed y'all don't do a lot on social media. I'd love to do that for you. So I hired her on sort of a short-term basis. I said, all right, let's do this. Let's give it, we'll give it 2 months. I want you to come up with a plan. I'm going to hire you for 2 months to do this. If it works well, we'll keep doing it. If not, we'll just go back to you just shooting for us. So she did that. It worked awesome. I loved what she was doing. And she said, okay, I also want to help with this. And so I kind of kept giving her more and more until it kind of turned into a full-time job. And so she became our studio manager, and now she really kind of runs the show. So yeah, that's sort of how we kind of got started and started really building the team out.
Awesome. And so now, like in 2019, I'd love to know kind of, how many of your weddings you're planning on shooting with Lady Bird Studios, and kind of what the team looks like today. Are you still hiring people, or is Taylor helping hire people? Are you looking to hire people? Are you looking to expand and grow and conquer, or are you kind of leveling out? What's the plan going forward with that? Yeah,
we actually hired a new photographer yesterday. So
nice.
Yes. Especially, so we added photography about a year and a half ago to our offerings. And so the photography side is sort of that's another slow build. It's almost like starting over a little bit less because we already had like a following. And so like people are coming to the site and then they see the photography. I think probably my guess is at some point, maybe in 2020, there's going to make a turn where we end up doing more photography than video is my guess, but I don't know that. At this point, we're still doing way more video than photo. But I expect in this year, like we're probably going to end up with like 40 photo weddings is my guess, based on kind of where we're at now and what the inquiries look like for the rest of this year. Yeah. Wow. And I think that we'll probably be in, a similar place, 120 to 150 wedding videos. Maybe, I don't know, it's the beginning of the year and, we know that as wedding video people that a lot of times we get hired last minute. So, it's kind of hard to predict what our year looks like, particularly when you're more a budget friendly option. A lot of times it's more common that you get booked later and later. Right. We do have people who are booking us out to like the end of 2020. But we also sometimes take jobs that were booked like, 5 days before the wedding. Yeah. And so, it's very hard to predict what this year's going to look like, but I anticipate like total that we're somewhere between like 100 and 140 to 200 weddings in 2019, but who knows?
And so I guess the question that it's pretty obvious is like, how in the heck are you doing this? Like, how many people does this take to do? Like, how many teams can you send out in a day? Obviously, with 150 weddings, you're taking on multiple teams. How many people are ready at just at the drop of a hat to go shoot a wedding for you?
So we have 12 people that are part of the team right now, including myself. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 who are pretty much full time. 4 that are definitely full time, and 1 sort of like pretty close. He's our main photographer, is pretty close to full time. And the others, so I have 2 video editors, and one of them does all the weddings at this point, and the other one does our corporate stuff. We're also doing like a lot of educational content, a lot of marketing material for my other brand, Film Mavericks. We also put a lot of educational content out there like you guys on YouTube and whatnot under the Film Mavericks name, and so he does all that kind of stuff as well as like all of our corporate clients. And then Taylor runs the show for Lady Bird Studios. She also helps out with Film Mavericks. She's actually taken on the role of studio manager for Film Mavericks, although I'm a lot more hands-on in the day-to-day stuff with that. But everybody else is part-time, hourly employee. Okay. So that means they are they're not freelancers because like they're using my equipment. They're working on the schedule that I tell them to. So like legally they're not freelancers that hired them as like W-2 employees, but they're hourly, and so it's just kind of a as we need them basis, which and really hiring everybody is sort of a per project basis, even if they're full time, has really helped us a lot because it has helped us to sort of sustain all of this. So it's very predictable what my expenses are going to be for any wedding. So rather than saying, okay, every month my expenses are the same, I can say for every wedding, my expenses are the same.
That's really good.
And so it really helps me to say, okay, I know for every wedding, I'm going to have to spend this much in order to produce it from start to finish without having to talk to the client after the sale at all myself. So I know exactly how much I'm going to profit from each wedding.
Yeah. It makes me think just about like, I've listened to a few of the podcasts that you and Taylor have done about volume brands. I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned Film Mavericks and the education side of what you do. I know we could spend the rest of the hour talking about volume brands and building, but I feel like that content is there, and we'll plug the podcast just to make sure that our listeners, if they don't already listen to you, will find that. But when did you decide, I remember a few years ago, just out of the blue, there's this guy, Jordan Bunn. He's got Wedding Film Academy. When did you decide, like, education? Did that happen before? I know you got some stuff going on with, like, the Lumix, everything. Where does education play in? When did you get started with that?
Yeah, so I've always been a sort of a podcast junkie. I love listening to podcasts, and several years ago, I got sponsorship from Lumix, and so with that came like a lot of like traveling and teaching in different places, whether it's like at conferences or like camera stores or camera club events, all this kind of stuff like that. And I loved it. Had so much fun traveling, seeing new places I hadn't seen before, and teaching was a lot of fun. And I started like, I just sort of like became curious. I was like, I wonder why I've never found a wedding video podcast. And so I looked around for a long time. Finally, I found one, and I just felt like the advice that was, I won't say the name of it, but the advice that it was being given, I felt like was like really terrible advice.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was just like one guy who, he wasn't having guests on or anything. It was just like his opinion the whole time. And I was just like, oh no, don't teach people this. This is awful. So anyways, that sort of like sparked, like probably 2 weeks later, I started my podcast. And I always wanted it to be sort of like what you guys are doing now, where it wasn't like a guy. I didn't feel like I was the expert. I don't think that anyone in this industry is the expert.
Right.
And I think that there's so many different ways of approaching this that are all viable and that are going to fit different people's personalities and lifestyles better than others. You know, like running a volume brand is not for everyone. It's probably not for the vast majority of people in this industry. And so I think that it would be crazy for me to be the one who's only teaching this stuff. And so from the very beginning, it was a community thing. We started the podcast almost 2 years ago to the date. I think it's like been 23 months since we started the podcast, the Wedding Film Academy podcast. And it was always about learning from other people. We took a really different approach where I would take a particular subject and then interview 3 to 4 people about that one topic. And I would also try to get people who I knew would have different opinions about those topics and different perspectives on those topics. And so, you know, if we were going to talk about pricing, then I was going to talk to one person who is just like, you know, charging through the roof, another person who is like focused on like package options, another person who is like focused on a la carte, and then I actually had Matt Johnson interview me talking about, you know, volume pricing. And so we wanted to like get really different opinions on every topic that we covered, because that's just what's best for the community overall. And that grew the podcast really quick. I mean, you know, last time that I looked, we had 14,000 downloads on the podcast every time we were putting something out. And, you know, that was awesome. But things really started to shift for me because I became more and more passionate about corporate work, about like storytelling in the corporate and nonprofit world. And I didn't want to exclusively be teaching weddings if I wasn't going to be shooting a whole lot of weddings myself. I'm still running a wedding brand, but I've really kind of put Jordan Bunch Productions, my boutique wedding brand, kind of on the back burner. I don't really advertise it at all anymore. I've tried to make the cost prohibitive for people in my market. And so like if I do get a wedding, it's like I'm richly rewarded for it, but I'm fine if I don't get very many weddings. And so I wanted to shift the way I was teaching as well, because I figured a lot of other people are probably in a similar place where they're also wanting to do things other than weddings. And the other thing was the approach to my corporate brand, Film Mavericks. One of like our major offerings that we're doing for our clients is helping them to build a brand as an influencer in their industry. And so I thought maybe I should just also do that for myself. And so I rebranded the podcast. The Wedding Film Academy podcast is now the Film Mavericks podcast. And at the moment, it's primarily on YouTube. We're still putting it out on iTunes. But the main place for that to live is now on YouTube. So we're sort of starting over and kind of rebuilding an audience as we've done this rebrand. But it's positioning us to do a whole lot more in terms of what we can teach, the sort of subjects we can teach, and also who we can bring on, you know, because we were doing corporate stuff on the Wedding Film Academy podcast, but some of the people who I might like to be on the show, might not be interested in being on a show called The Wedding Film Academy, because they're sort of trying to distance themselves from weddings for whatever reason. And so, being able to have a different type of guest on the show as well, sort of benefits that name change. So that's sort of what we're doing in the education space these days. I'm doing a lot more traveling and teaching. I'm teaching at the Wedding Film Retreat next month. I'm also in Puerto Vallarta, which I'm pumped about. I'm also teaching at WPPI, teaching a class and judging the film competition there. And so I love that kind of stuff. I love opportunities to travel and like meet other people in the industry, share what I've learned over the years, and it's just a blast. So yeah.
That's great. Just sitting there listening to you talk about it, and as it's grown, I mean, I can relate very, very much with, at one point we had 12 people working for me and was growing this thing, and like I wanted to turn it into something else. So I've pared way back, and I actually talked to you about that on your podcast. But just the idea of continually, like, I think it's cool, I guess so, and respectable that you had an idea, you went for it, you heard a podcast that you thought wasn't great. 2 weeks later, boom, you're doing a podcast in your building, and you didn't have probably everything figured out when you started it, and you have, pivoted and course corrected as you've gone along. And I think that's a lot to, especially with building a brand that goes beyond yourself, being able to be willing to give up some of that control, to be willing to like take the time to train other people. Yes, they could go start their own company, and yes, there's this trust that goes along with it. But like, you might talk just for a sec about like what that looks like. That when you're training other people, you love teaching. That's part of like what you like are born to do. It seems like in teaching and training these people. You don't seem like somebody that thinks, like you said, I've got all the answers figured out. But like your attitude is like, I just want to learn and I want to teach people. Moving forward with your business, I mean, are you planning? We kind of talked about it a little bit, but like, is Austin where you're landing with the Lady Bird? Are you looking at growing past that city? Are you like, what are you excited about moving forward with your business?
Yeah, great questions. I don't think that Austin is like the place that we just camp out in Austin. In fact, we actually started advertising and marketing in San Antonio this month. Nice. So this is the first month that we did that, and we got really amazing results. And thankfully, Austin and San Antonio are pretty close to each other, so we can just tack on like a $300 travel fee, and it just then it makes sense for us to do that. So yeah, we're expanding at least to San Antonio, and kind of like, okay, let's think more about how we think about like Central Texas for now. And I don't know if things. I've definitely put thought to the idea that we have other major cities in Texas that could support what we do. But getting outside of like Central Texas sort of opens up a whole new can of worms. If we were to like go to Houston or Dallas or something, like that would sort of open up a whole new can of worms. I would really, at that point, that's not like a day drivable thing. It is, but like not for like somebody to come and visit us sort of thing in our studio here. So it probably would mean like having a whole team of people in a different city. And at this point, that's not something that we're ready for. At some point, we could do that, but that's several years away at least. What I am excited about now is I feel like our product is getting really good. And it does sort of, at one point, like I would have, like when I was running Jordan Bunch Productions heavily alongside that, like in 2017, I think I still did 35 weddings myself. With Jordan Bunch Productions, and at that point, like I would have been really nervous if Lady Bird Studios had gotten really good, because I like maybe I'm going to cannibalize myself. But then when my goals shifted, I was like, heck, let's get really stinking good, and we are getting really good, and so I'm pumped about the product. Like we're submitting a piece to the WPPI film competition. I'm just sort of like curious. I want to see what other people's feedback is about it. It's a really different wedding film because we have a lot of footage that you would never normally have in a wedding film because of some different circumstances around it. We actually filmed like their engagement, their proposal. The groom is a vlogger, and so like we have some of that content that like still fits because you're allowed to use like historical footage that you didn't film yourself up to 20% of the film. And so like we have some really unique stuff, and so we told the story in a really unique way because of that. So I'm excited about the way that our team has grown. We have very talented shooters that just give us really consistent stuff. Like they're just nailing exposure and white balance. They're getting great compositions. And it's a lot of it is just because of like that consistent ongoing feedback. Like I give them feedback, with every single wedding film, they get feedback from us. And so we're just getting better and better stuff every time. My editor is just killing it. Marshall is just a freaking beast, and he's just doing all kinds of new fun stuff that is just awesome. So I'm like pumped about our product that we're putting out right now. It's really freaking awesome. But I'm also really pumped about the stuff that we're doing with Film Mavericks. It is certainly where I'm investing most of my time these days is in growing that. I'm thinking more about how to become an influencer in the sort of video marketing space. So to sort of make that marketing material for us as Film Mavericks as a company, but valuable content, for it to be valuable content to small, medium, and large businesses who need to understand more about how video marketing works, just to be giving away that free content so that as they're learning, as they're thinking, we're sort of top of mind and sort of making that connection of, okay, these are the people who are teaching me and they do this, and the stuff that they're putting out as they're teaching me is high quality, so let's reach out to them.
Whenever we talked to Scott McKenna a few weeks ago on the podcast, he said that he, like with his own channel that he's just putting out a ton of content so that the people in his area will see his face, like businesses will see his face when they search YouTube. So whenever they're ready to hire a marketer or a video production company or whatever, oh, I'm going to hire this guy because I see his face on YouTube all over the place. So that kind of sounds what you're trying to do and trying to get out there with your Film Mavericks thing, which I think is a great. I mean, you're helping build your own brand, and anyway, I think that's great. The other thing I wanted to point out is, I've gotten several comments, with us starting this podcast, and from some other business people in that I talked to, like at church or whatever. They're like, "Well, aren't you afraid you're training your competition?" And I remember whenever you were talking, I think with Matt on your podcast about, hiring all these people, and he kind of asked you the same thing. And you were like, hey, with my editor that I have, that's fantastic. I have trained him. And I really believe that, if he succeeds in life because of these things that I have taught him, then I have done my job. Right? I mean, you basically said that. And I can just, in hearing you talk about your volume brand and hearing you talk, like I can see the joy in your face and the excitement in your face, and I can hear it in your voice that you're like, here's this thing that you basically said, I don't touch anymore except for the sales. But you see these people succeeding and you're helping. And I don't know, I think that's just a great attitude to have, especially if you are going to become hands-off and training people and giving them the tools to succeed in not only the businesses they work for you, but maybe later in life. I think that's just a great thing that you're doing.
I mean, if you're operating out of that mentality, you're just operating out of a place of fear, and that's never a good place to be. Like I'm operating out of this like place of, I've been blessed with so much. I'm going to hand that out to other people and get as much blessings into their life as I possibly can. And I tell you, like, people think that, all these people are just going to leave and go do their own thing. And, honestly, like, truly, if they do, and that's what success in life looks like for them, and they can look back and point back to when people say, how'd you get to this place? That they can point back and say, well, it started with Jordan Bunch because he didn't hold anything back. He taught me everything that he knew. He wouldn't let me settle for good enough. And that's how I've built this life for myself and my family. Like, that's way better than, millions of dollars to me. Like, honestly, if I have dozens of people that can say that, then job well done at the end of my life, but the other thing about that is that by having this attitude, by having the attitude of, I'm not going to operate out of a place of fear. I'm going to teach you with no limitation, and I'm going to push you forward. I'm going to push you harder and harder, and I'm going to reward you when you do a good job, both like in encouragement and in more freedom to do what you want to do, and in freedom of time and in financial rewards. Like, most of my people, it feels like they don't have a desire to leave that. Like they would, not everybody's wired to run a business on their own. Some people would rather just stick to the creative stuff. If you're an artist, you might not be interested in accounting and, managing a website and marketing and all this stuff. You might just want to film and edit weddings. Or corporate work or whatever it is, but you might just want to be behind a camera, or you might just want to be behind a computer editing. And if you have someone who is in your corner 100%, then you're probably going to stay with that person. And that's what I found to be more true. I've only actually had one person who they elected to leave and go do their own thing. And the whole time that we've been doing this, I've had other people who have sort of said, okay, it's, for different reasons, like it wasn't a good fit. But I've only had one person who elected to leave, and he honored that relationship so much that he said, I think I'm going to be leaving, but I want to give you like 6 months heads up here. And I would like to be here to help train whoever's going to fill those shoes for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so it was like a super easy transition because of that. And where most people, they would sort of come to it from a place of fear of, if I tell him I'm going to quit, like he's just going to fire me early. If I tell him 6 months from now, well, he's going to let go of me in 2 weeks, Well, because I have this attitude, they know that I'm in their corner, so I'm going to do what's best for them. And I even told them that, like we sat down to lunch and I said, we'll transition out at whatever pace is good for you. So as we're training up this new person, they're just going to be super part-time at whatever pace. And, you're going to get first dibs on all the edits, and you transition them in as you feel comfortable. And then, when it's time for you and you feel like you can make that switch to full-time on your own, then let's do it. And so, we planned on doing it over 6 months, and I think we actually ended up doing it in like 3, because, he kind of got our editor up to speed and he felt like he was good on his own. And so we split ways, but he, a couple months later, he still came to our summer boat party, because we still feel like he's part of our team in that way. And so, it's a very different culture. I'm all about building a vibrant culture. And so I feel like that's what we've done.
I'll say too, like, I think a lot of people get into weddings and they're like, I'm just going to shoot weddings. And then they are like trying to figure out the business side of it. And like, being somebody that has employees as well, and like seeing that you could provide something for somebody. I mean, not all of us are shooting the most creative, epic wedding films, like that's not like on my brand. I'm not known for, oh my goodness, this guy's going to just blow you away with his creativity. I've built a business, and what I'm planning to do with mine is to have something that is sustainable after me. I'm 34. I'm shooting way less weddings and bringing, people on to help. And I think that like thinking ahead on things like that, like you've done, giving that knowledge to different people. Yes, there could be some people that, go do their own thing. I've had some of the people that worked for me go do, start their own companies or whatever. But like my heart has always been the same, where it's like, hey, if you want to go start your own thing and run this business and do this thing, that's great. But for the majority of people, they don't want to run their own business. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And, as, our team gets bigger, and as, like people start, like for instance, with Taylor, who's working for you, maybe in 5-10 years, she doesn't want to shoot anymore. And she, at that point, can go to a new role and train more and more people. But what you're building is something that goes beyond you. You don't have to be there. And like the first time that I got paid for a wedding that I wasn't there, and like I tasted that, like not just because it was like, hey, I made, a good paycheck, but it was like, these people are fulfilled. These people, are doing something that they love. And to some people, the idea of just being able to show up at a wedding, be creative, edit the wedding, and not have to worry about marketing it or dealing with it, it's like a dream job for them. So like, I think it's like super respectable, especially with the podcast that you're doing and everything that's going on in your world, and you're training different people. That place of fear that most people would be in, like, oh, I don't want somebody to take me down. If you're in that position, I would encourage you, as you're listening, that like there are plenty of weddings for everybody. There are always going to be enough jobs for everybody.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, like, and some people are going to hate me for this, but if you are having your people sign non-compete clauses, you're a coward.
Boom.
Like, straight up, you're afraid. You're Nancy who doesn't believe in themselves, doesn't believe in their ability to run a successful business as more competitors come in. You're a coward. So don't have your people sign non-compete clauses. Support your people. Help them be successful, no matter what that looks like.
That's incredible. I like that. I would second that. But I wouldn't say it out loud, but Jordan did it for me, so that's good. As we're getting a little bit closer to the end of our hour here, I wanted to just kind of help make sure that our listeners know where to find you, the best places to get a hold of you, the best social places to get a hold of you. Where can people find Jordan Bunch?
So right now, for your audience, the best place is Film Mavericks. All the stuff that we're doing, both on YouTube. So search for Film Mavericks on YouTube. Also, our Instagram. We're putting a lot of stuff, a lot of good content on Instagram, and it's not just like we're posting like our stuff, right? It's actually like primarily about the educational stuff that we're doing. So definitely check us out on YouTube. We're real big on the stories. We give a lot of behind the scenes stuff on the stories. So we actually did like a whole tour of like our green screen room over there, and kind of showed how that works and how the lighting setup works. So like we actually give valuable content on the stories as well. You can find us on the Film Mavericks page where we post all this content as well. And then the Wedding Film Academy Facebook group is a great place if you want to engage with me and with the community. That's still a great place to check us out. And then if you want to see the work that Lady Bird Studios does, ladybirdstudios.com. You can also find it, on Facebook and on Instagram via the same name. So
love it. Well, I know we could sit here and talk for a long time about all these things. I do encourage people to jump on the Film Mavericks podcast. I think I was actually the first official guest on the Film Mavericks podcast, so definitely check that out.
That's right. When we rebranded it. Yeah, we rebranded it. You were the first one.
Man. So anyway, big things happening over there. I really do appreciate your time. I know that you're a busy man.
Yeah, for sure.
And we definitely will have you back on here. Best of luck moving forward with you and everything you're doing, Jordan. Seriously. I feel like we're very similar, and it's always good to catch up with you. And one day we'll meet in person. That'll be great. And anyway, I really do appreciate you being on time or being on the podcast. Nick, I'll let you wrap it up. Don't laugh at me.
I noticed we're wrapping up right after I called all your guests cowards.
Well,
so
here's the thing.
That's probably what.
Here's the thing. You call someone coward. I got to get out of here quick. That's really what's going to happen. No, you did call them cowards. All of our listeners. No.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, John. Let me keep going. I'm just kidding.
All right, 15 more unedited minutes of Jordan going off, because he randomly will go on these like he'll get salty on a post online every now and then. I don't know if you know it.
Every now and
he'll
then.
be like, blessings to all of you, and then somebody will say something and he's like, boom. Oh, really now? Okay, here's what I really think. So
throw some truth bombs out there.
No, I think it's super great. Well, I'm going to wrap up the conversation so I don't make Nick. Oh my God, I don't make Nick laugh at me. So, hey, to everybody who's listening or watching on YouTube, please do us a favor. Help us share this podcast with others. And until next time, see ya.
Peace.
See ya. Oh man, I hate landing the plane. Jordan, how do you land the plane?